Hello and welcome to the final lecture in the course User Centric Computing for Human Computer Interaction. So, we have reached the end of the course, and today I would like to briefly discuss what we have learned and how we can utilize this knowledge. So, essentially we will discuss on two broad aspects of the learning, that is what we have learned and how to utilize the knowledge. So, in order to understand or to recollect what we have learned, let us start with the overall objective of the course. So, at the beginning we talked about the learning objective. The most important objective that we mentioned is the idea of interactive systems and how to design and evaluate. It was also mentioned from the very beginning that our primary focus is to learn about the design and evaluation of interactive systems from an engineering or computational perspective. Now, the basic idea is that interactive systems involve consideration of the users, because the users play a primary role in the overall acceptability of an interactive system. Now, if users do not like it, then definitely it is not going to be commercially successful. How do we know that users are going to like it? That is the main issue in the design of an interactive system. But there are two ways to look at it. One is a creative design aspect, that is designing the look and feel and interactions, and the other one is the engineering process, that is the process involved in developing the overall system. Now, we also differentiated between two components of the interactive systems. One is the hardware component, one is the software component, and our focus was mainly on the software component. So, to rephrase the broad objective, we wanted to learn how to design and evaluate the software component of an interactive system, where the main issue is to incorporate the user centric considerations in the design process. So, in order to do that, in order to learn those aspects of design, what we did, we have covered several subtopics which were designed to give you an overall idea of the design and evaluation of interactive systems from a computational perspective. What are those topics? So, the very first thing of course was to learn about the basic idea of interactive systems, what are those, why they are important, and what are the issues that confront a designer of interactive system. This overall foundation for the course was taken up. Then we discussed about the software design process, that is another objective, to know how an interactive system software can be designed following a life cycle, and we talked about that. Then another learning objective was to understand the role of computation in this design of the interactive system software. Now, software design process of course is a very elaborate process, and in this process what role a computation plays is very important to know, and that was another objective for the course. In order to understand the role, we needed to have some higher level understanding of computations and how a software can be related to computation, and that we tried to achieve with an overall computational framework. So, understanding this framework of computation in the context of design of an interactive system software was another learning objective. Then a component of the framework, which is the major component, constitute the idea of computational models of users. Now, yet another learning objective of this course was to have a comprehensive idea of those models and how they can be used. And also it was important to know how to build those models, and that was another objective. Finally, it is always important to know about the methodologies, the techniques that are used to evaluate interactive software, and we wanted to have a comprehensive idea of those methodologies as a final objective. Now, in order to fulfill these learning objectives, what we have done? We have divided the topics into 30 lectures of varying durations, and we covered all those topics into these 30 lectures. So, let us try to quickly have a recap of the major topics and the corresponding lectures that were used to cover those topics. So, there are 30 lectures, as you know. In the first 3 lectures, lecture 1 to lecture 3, we have covered the basic idea of interactive systems, what are those, why they are important, and what are the big challenges and issues in the design of such systems. The next 4 lectures, from lecture 4 to lecture 8, were devoted to understanding the engineering process involved in the design of interactive systems. Essentially, we covered the software development life cycles that is required to build an interactive system software. The core component, that is the computational aspect in the design, was covered in lecture number 9 and 10. So, here we discussed about understanding the role of computation in the software development and how to incorporate the computation in the software. Now, as I have already mentioned, there are models which form a major component of the computational approach, which have been represented in the form of that computational framework. Now, these user models are of different types, and we got some comprehensive idea of those different types of user models in lecture number 11 and 12. The specific models that are of importance to this course and to the understanding of the computational framework were covered in lecture number 13 to lecture number 22. Now, these lectures were divided into 2 broad groups of lectures. In lecture number 13 to 17, that is the 5 lectures were devoted to the discussion on classical models of the users, namely the GOMS, the KLM, the Fitts law and the Hickman law. Lecture number 18 to 22, the next 4 lectures were devoted to the discussion on models or computational user models for contemporary interactions. So, here we have covered models related to touch interaction, mobile typing, constrained navigation and so on. Another class of computational models were discussed in the 2 lectures, lecture 23 and 24. Those are called formal models of interactive systems. Now, these models were slightly different in nature than the user models that we have discussed in the previous lectures, but their overall objective is to capture the usability concerns and include that in the overall software. However, here as we have discussed, in these models the usability concerns were captured in an indirect way, unlike the computational user models that we have discussed in the previous lectures, particularly in the form of state transition networks of different varieties. Lecture number 25 was devoted to a detailed discussion on how to use the models in the design. So, this is a very important lecture to understand the use of the models in the overall design process and how they are related to user centricness and how they incorporate user centric concerns in the design of the interactive system software. An important concept is empirical research or empirical study, which is very relevant for evaluation of a system as well as for building the models that we have discussed, some of the models that we have discussed in the previous lectures. Now, a detailed discussion on this empirical research method for user centric system design and model building have been done in lecture number 26 to 28 in these 3 lectures. Now, empirical evaluation is one of the many evaluation methods. There are other methods as well, and as we said, one of our learning objective is to have a comprehensive understanding of the different evaluation techniques that we can apply to evaluate an interactive system. That we did in these 2 lectures, lecture number 29 and lecture number 30. So, the last 2 lectures were devoted to our understanding of the evaluation methods, all the varieties of methods that we can employ to evaluate an interactive system. That is the breakup of the topics that we have covered and the corresponding lectures that were devoted to those topics. The next question is how to use the knowledge. So, we have gained some knowledge. You are expected to gain knowledge after going through these 30 lectures, but how to utilize that knowledge, that is basically one important question, and that is related to the learning outcome. Now, there are many case studies that we have covered in those lectures which discussed the ways to utilizing the knowledge in the design and evaluation of interactive systems. So, you may revisit the lectures 8, and 25 for detailed discussion on these topics. And also, if you may have noticed that in each lecture or in many of the lectures, there are many smaller examples which were explained to let you know how to utilize the knowledge. Broadly, we can utilize the knowledge in either of the two ways, either to design a system, particularly a system software, or to analyze a given design. And the idea is simple. If we are planning to use the knowledge to design a system, to design an interactive system software, what we should do? Our starting point would be the framework which we have covered in lecture 10. Given a problem, we will start with the framework. Now, this framework, if you may recollect, contains some generic modules. So, you may start trying to identify the relevant components or modules in the framework that are suitable for the particular problem. And one component of the framework is the predictive user models. Now, we have already covered many models, and you are advised to check again lecture number 13 to 24. So, any of those models you can think of using to implement that particular component which deals with predictive user models. If none of them fits, then you can try to build your own model. Now, how to do that? We have already discussed in lecture 28 how to build a model from empirical data. So, you can use that knowledge to build your model and implement that as part of the framework. That is one way of utilizing the knowledge. Other way is to analyze a given design. So, you are given a design and you want to understand how good or well developed it is. So, here your starting point is of course the design. Now, you also have the knowledge of the framework. So, try to understand the design in terms of the framework by comparing the components of the given design with the components of the framework. As I have said, the framework has been covered in detail in lecture number 10. So, you can revisit that. Now, during this mapping, if you find that some components of the framework are not represented well in the design, or some components of the design are there which does not have any corresponding counterpart in the framework, then you may try to make the design compatible with the framework. Now, why that is going to be helpful? Because if you manage to do that, it is likely to lead to a more systematic understanding of the design. So, that is our overall objective. When we know of the framework, we can think of the design in a more systematic way. We can think of building a system in a more systematic and clearer way. So, essentially that is a conceptual clarity that the framework brings to our thinking of the design process. If you have noticed, in both the cases we mentioned that we start with the framework. So, this computational framework which we have covered in lecture number 10 provides a foundation for the course, and all other topics and lectures that covered those topics are essentially meant to serve the purpose of understanding the framework. So, that is our overall idea in the course, that the core component is provided by the framework and other lectures are meant to explain the idea of framework in a more clearer and detailed way. Now, if you manage to get this idea, that is going to serve the purpose of the course. However, you should note one thing. The framework is primarily meant for better understanding of the design process as well as the design itself. Now, why we need to do that? Because this framework is likely to lead to better management of the entire software development process. As I said, it gives us some systematic way of thinking about the development process, and that systematic way at a conceptual level leads to more clarity on what to do and how to manage that. So, that is the true advantage of the framework. But we should not lose sight of another very important fact, that is, any design is also a creative process. So, there are two components involved, one is the creative process, one is the systematic process. With the framework, this creative aspect we cannot replace. So, it is not meant to replace the creativity, you still require it. However, what the framework does is it complements the creative process. In what way? So, you come up with a design and you want to implement it, the framework helps you understand how to implement it, or in other words, it helps you by aiding in the implementation through a systematic engineering approach. So, that is the true goal, that the design of a system has a creative component as well as a systematic component. Framework is meant to help in the systematic component, which is primarily meant to understand, meant to let the designer understand the process better, whereas the creative aspects are still there and the framework is meant to complement that process. Now, that is the true purpose of all the lectures that we have covered in this topic. I hope you will be able to understand the core idea and you will be able to utilize the knowledge as we have discussed. So, whatever we have discussed so far, these are primarily related to basic understanding of the topic. What we did not discuss in details at least is that the scope of research. Our discussion so far actually revolved around few things: how to use the knowledge, whatever knowledge we have gained in this course, how to use it, and this discussion primarily aimed for the practitioners who practice in the related area, the designers of interactive systems, developers of interactive systems, or coders, programmers of interactive systems. And the knowledge, as we have already mentioned, can be utilized to get a systematic understanding on the process of building the systems or analyzing such interactive systems. But in the process, we did not talk much on the latest research. We briefly discussed the research trends in the very first week of the course, particularly in lecture 3, and there we covered broad areas, namely the ubiquitous computing, the mobile interactions, the computer supported cooperative works, and so on. But these are very broad areas. In fact, there are many exciting works that are going on in this field, and all of these are very novel and very interesting. But in our discussion so far, we have not discussed or touched upon these works. So, how to know about these works? That is one of the crucial component of having a comprehensive understanding in the field. As we all know, the best way to get the knowledge about the things that are currently happening in the field is to follow some literature, and the literature consists of books primarily, but more importantly conference proceedings and journals. Along with that, there may be other components of the literature such as technical reports, monographs and so on, but our primary source of information to know about the latest trends, latest happenings come from the conference proceedings and the journals, which regularly publishes novel works and the activities that are currently going on in the field. Books we have already mentioned. The primary book that we followed in this course as well as some reference books were already mentioned at the beginning of the course. You may follow those books to know about some trends, and at the end of the books there are references, bibliography, and in the bibliography section you will find lots of materials that are related to latest research trends in the field. So, that is one source. Other source that you should follow is the proceedings of the conferences. The area is very emerging area where you actually can find lots of works in many conferences. So, there are a large number of conferences that take place every year around the world and in our country also, India. And if you follow these conference proceedings, then you will get to know what is happening in the field. Now, all these conferences we can divide into two broad groups. Some are very generic and publishes any work related to the field, and some are focused on more specific topics. Let us first have a look at the most popular and general conference venues where works related to the design of interactive systems and in general interaction with such systems are reported. The first in the list is called CHI or CHI. Now, this is a conference which is organized every year by the SIG-CHI group, special interest group on CHI, which is a flagship body that governs the activities that take place in this area. This is a part of the ACM or Association of Computing Machinery, and the name of the conference is Conference on Human Factors in Computing Systems, and more popularly it is known as CHI. So, every year this conference takes place and proceedings comes out. So, if you follow the proceedings, then you will get to know about the latest research trends. The second in the list is known as INTERACT. Now, there is another body, IFIP TC 13 or Technical Committee 13, which is actually tasked with activities related to the field of human computer interaction, similar to SIG-CHI. More about this body you can find at this website. This is a UN or United Nations recognized body, and this body also conducts one flagship conference, that is INTERACT. But this conference takes place every 2 years. So, it is not like CHI where you get to see the conference every year. There is another conference, HCII or HCI International, a very popular conference. Another conference is EICS, which stands for Engineering Interactive Computing Systems. This conference is also partly supported by the SIG-CHI group, but its main focus is primarily towards the engineering aspects of design of interactive systems, unlike the other three where all aspects are covered, design, engineering and computational aspects, which we have covered in this course. So, these are the most popular conferences. Along with that, there are some other smaller conferences on these broader aspects of the interactive system design. Along with those conferences, there are certain conferences that focuses on more specialized topics, as I mentioned at the beginning. For example, if you remember in lecture 3 we discussed about computer supported cooperative work. Now, in that area itself there is one flagship conference called CSCW, the same name, which is Computer Supported Cooperative Work. So, this conference publishes works that are related to this area of cooperative work supported by computers. Then we have UBComp, which is another flagship conference. It stands for Ubiquitous Computing. Now, again, if you recollect, in the first week, lecture 3, we mentioned this area. This is a very emerging and exciting area where lots of activities are taking place, and all these activities are reported, or at least the latest trends in this area are reported in this flagship conference. Similarly, there is one conference dedicated to the activities that are taking place in mobile HCI domain, and the name of the conference is Mobile HCI, which reflects its purpose also, where HCI stands for human computer interaction. These three are broadly the major areas. Similarly, there are other specific conferences catering to specific interests of the research community. So, these are conferences that are international in nature and that are catering to global audiences primarily. In India also we have a few conferences that cater to Indian as well as global audience, which are international in nature. Two are very regular. It happens every year or almost every year. One is India HCI, other one is Intelligent HCI, where HCI stands for Human Computer Interaction. These two are conducted by two separate bodies, but more or less every year these two conferences take place. Along with that, there are some conferences which are not so regular, maybe every few years these conferences take place. Their names also change, their organizers also change, but they are. So, some sporadic conferences are there on related areas of user centric design. Conferences are one way of knowing about the latest trend. Another good venue where we can learn about the latest trends is the journals. So, these are like conferences, there are many journals which cater to broad audience of user centric systems. If you recollect, when we are talking of the design of user centric systems, actually that is an interdisciplinary field which we mentioned at the beginning, and the people who are interested in this area come from various backgrounds. That include engineering background, that include computer science background, that include electronics background, that include sociology background, anthropology background, and so on. It is a vast collection of areas, and these conferences or journals actually cater to most of these areas. So, people from different areas publishes in these conferences or journals, and those are read by people with interdisciplinary background. Same is applicable for the journals. Now, there are some journals which are broad in scope, like those conferences I mentioned. I will just list few of the most popular journals where you can find many interesting works related to the field. One is Foundation and Trends in HCI. This is by Now Publishers. This is a very good journal to keep abreast of the latest trends and the foundations that define the field. Then there is the journal called HCI or Human Computer Interaction. This is by Taylor and Francis Publishing Group. We have SEM Transaction on Computer Human Interaction or TOKAI. This is by SEM Publishing. IEEE Transaction on Human Machine Systems. by IEEE. International Journal on Human Computer Studies or IJHCS. This is by Elsevier. Then International Journal on Human Computer Interaction. This is by again Taylor and Francis. One more is Interacting with Computers by Oxford University Press. So, these are the popular ones where you can get a good collection of articles that are related to the latest work that are going on in the field. Of course, there are many more such journals, but those are not as popular as this set that I mentioned. Apart from that, there are many journals which are focused towards specific topics, similar to specific conferences. Some of these can be user modeling and user adapted interaction, behavior and information technology, IEEE transaction on visualization and computer graphics, and so on. So, these are not primarily meant for HCI, but many works are published here which are related to the field of user centric computing, user centric design and HCI in general. The three journals I mentioned are only a very small subset of all those journals where related works are published, but those works are sporadic and not necessarily always focused in the specific area. In addition to these proceedings and the journal publications, you may make use of some online links, some online repositories to learn about the things that are going on in the field. One very good repository is HCI Bib. It is actually a collection of different materials which gives you some idea of the literature related to the field. It contains links to books, it contains links to conference proceedings, it contains links to journals, journal volumes, then it contains links to some blogs which are important and relevant, useful links to some other design guidelines, design templates, such as how to design web pages, how to design for the physically disabled, some very useful materials related to different practical aspects, different theoretical aspects and different literature aspects. However, although it may provide a good starting point, but as of today this site is not regularly maintained. So, whatever you will get to see on this site if you open it today is some information which was updated long ago, but still those informations are quite relevant and useful even today. But that is a starting point. Along with that, you may make use of some other online links. Here I have mentioned 3 links. you may find on your own many other links. So, one is the list of conferences in the field of HCI. You may check this link, conferenceservice.com, conferences, human computer interaction. So, in this page provided in the link, you will find HCI conferences that are taking place at different locations in the world, along with the conference dates, paper submission deadlines, and so on. However, it does not include links to proceedings of the conferences. Then another important site that you can make use of is the site maintained by SIGCHI, or as I said, Special Interest Group on Computer Human Interaction. In this page, you will find a conference listing, primarily conferences that are either partially or fully sponsored by SIGCHI, and this list is regularly updated. So, again you will get to know about the deadlines and conference dates from this listing. Now, these two are only a very small subset of many such conference listings that are available, but these two are regularly updated, and you will get a quick glance at the conferences that take place in this area, along with their typical time frames, deadlines, and so on, which will help you to look for proceedings of those conferences, or to consider submitting your research work. If you have done any research work in this area, to consider submitting your research work to the conference. Another important link, which is not a listing of any conference, but which is very useful, is a link where you will find details about the use of statistical methods in this field. Now, if you recollect, we discussed the use of statistical methods in the lectures that we covered in week 7, particularly in the context of statistical significance testing. And this link contains a very nice write-up, a very detailed and nice write-up on the use of such testing on the empirical data that we generate during the empirical studies. So, in the relevant lecture, we have covered in brief the different techniques, but in this particular online repository, you will get to know in more details about those techniques, as well as when to use those and many such details. As I said, to keep yourself up to date about the happenings in the field, the best place to look for are the conference proceedings and the journal issues. Now, when we are looking at the conference proceedings or journal issues, one important thing that we should keep in mind is the quality of the conferences or journals. So, how do we know that the particular conference that we have found out publishes good quality work which are reliable? Of course, there is no straightforward answer to this question, and it is somewhat based on our experience. So, we can make a judgment about the quality of the paper based on our experience. However, if you are a beginner in the area of research and if you do not have much idea about how to look for quality, one help that you can get is to find out the quality based on some ranking. So, there are websites which publishes the ranks of the conferences and also journals. So, these ranks tell us about the quality. So, if some conference is ranked very highly, that means we can be very sure of the quality of the publications that come out in the proceedings of that conference. Whereas, if some conference is ranked lowly or not found in a ranking site, that means their quality is doubtful, and we should not rely very much on the works that are reported in the proceedings of that conference. However, it is not as simple as that, and I would like to put a disclaimer here. Although the ranking sites are there and people follow it, but our judgment should not be based entirely on the outcome of the ranking sites. Sometimes some unranked conferences or journals may also turn out to be very good, and we should use the knowledge judiciously. We should not blankly say that if some conference or journal is not found in the list of ranked conferences or journals, then that is very bad. That is not what we can conclude based on the ranking. However, it is advisable that if something is not found in this conference or journal rankings, then you should double check about its quality and then go for using the knowledge that is reported in the proceedings. Now, one popular ranking portal is called CORE. It is very widely used ranking portal, particularly in the field of computer science. You can access this portal through this link core.edu.au, stands for Australia. So, it is maintained in Australia. Although it is mentioned as conference portal, but here you will find links to find a rank of a particular journal. So, it also contains journal ranking information. So, whenever you are unsure about the quality of a particular conference that you have found out to be relevant, then you may check this portal to see whether this portal lists that particular conference, in which category it lists, and if it is not listed, whether it is really good or not. That decision you have to make on your own based on probably taking advice from some other researchers. Now, in this portal, conferences are ranked in a particular way. So, there are some conferences which are called A star, that means they are very high quality. Then there are some which are A category, then there are B category conferences, C category conferences, and below C, if any conference is there, those are called unranked. Now, the conferences that I mentioned, for example, CHI is ranked as A star as per CORE ranking. Interact is ranked as A. Some conferences are ranked as B, some are C, and some conferences that may be relevant but not find a mention in the list are also there. So, as I said, I would like to repeat that again. We should use this knowledge judiciously. We should not blindly believe in the ranking only. It is quite possible that some very good work get published in a unranked conference or journal, and we should not ignore that work simply because it is not ranked in that particular portal. Apart from CORE, there are other ranking sites also, but CORE is quite popular. So, if you like, you may follow this CORE ranking. So, if you find a conference or a journal, you may like to check its category. If it is A star as per CORE ranking, then it is very good, there is no doubt about it. If it is A, that is also very good, no doubt about it. B or C means they are slightly lesser in quality compared to A star or A, but they are also fine. But if there is something which is not ranked, then you should independently verify the quality based on your knowledge or based on the advice received from some other researchers who are working in this area, and then make a decision. Some of you will be interested in doing research in this area, and if you are interested in doing research, I just want to repeat again that first thing is you should be up to date about the current things that are going on. the best place to do is to go through the conference proceedings and journal volumes, because they are regularly published and report latest work. I have already mentioned few well known conferences both in the broad areas of the field as well as specific areas. So, you may follow these. Along with that, you may also like to find out some more conferences and journals on your own. There are actually a large number of such conferences and journals. I have covered only a very few. And if you are not sure about the quality, you may like to follow the core ranking portal and then make an informed decision. And also I would like to mention one last thing, that is the reference books that we have mentioned at the end of each lecture. Although I have mentioned selectively some sections from the book, you are advised to go through the other sections as well to get better understanding of the topics covered. So, with that I would like to end this course. Thank you very much.